What if I told you the absolute best way to learn a new language is to listen to a story so spectacularly flawed that the main character like magically changes his name halfway through, and
Yeah.
then he proceeds to buy his wife a men's watch.
I mean, it sounds counterintuitive to say the least, but there is actually a profound psychological mechanism at work in that exact kind of absurdity.
Yeah, and we are going to get into that mechanism today
Yeah.
because I want you, the listener, to think about the friction of learning something completely new.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, the friction of learning a language. We often assume mastering French or Japanese requires staring at dry grammar tables until your eyes glaze over.
Oh, absolutely. The classic textbook fatigue.
Right.
Yeah.
But we actually internalize the rhythm of a language through narrative. And the source material for today's deep dive is a fascinating case study in how that narrative is constructed.
It really is.
We're looking at a transcript from a program called English Practice World, and the specific lesson is titled Everyday English Conversation, a Surprise Anniversary.
Very catchy.
Right. On the surface, this reads like the most basic, paint-by-numbers, low-budget educational audio play imaginable. It's designed to teach English to beginners through a simple 5-scene domestic drama.
Yeah, the initial read-through definitely gives you that Hallmark educational theater vibe.
Oh, totally.
Complete with, exaggerated enunciation and highly telegraphed plot points.
It feels like an audio soap opera.
Okay.
But the mission for our deep dive today is to peel back the layers of this seemingly basic melodrama. Because when you scrutinize the structure, you uncover this hidden architecture of pedagogical strategies.
Yes.
Some genuinely mind-bending narrative anomalies and complex cultural markers. It transforms from a cheesy script into a surprisingly brilliant educational tool.
It really does.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the baseline. Because to understand the absolute weirdness that happens later in this transcript, we first have to look at the normalities established right out of the gate in Scene 1.
Exactly. You kind of have to map the boundaries of the world before you can analyze why the writers decided to just bulldoze them.
Right, so let's look at those boundaries. Scene 1 sets up our protagonists, Paul and Emily.
Okay.
They're playing a husband and wife, and the writers lean heavily into universally recognized tropes. It's the morning of their 10-year anniversary. Emily, the wife, is rushing around frantically because she has an 8 a.m. meeting.
A classic setup.
Yep. Paul, the husband, is playing it cool. Emily tests the waters, asking if he has plans tonight, and Paul casually drops he's a yoga class and will probably be home late.
Right. The classic marital misdirection. He wants her to believe he forgot the milestone entirely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Emily leaves the house, utterly defeated, assuming he's completely forgotten a decade of marriage. But the script immediately gives the listener a theatrical wink. Paul says to himself, "She thinks I forgot." And then we hear Emily muttering to herself, "I didn't forget at all."
Ah, dramatic irony.
Right. So Scene 2 shifts to Paul at work, confirming his secret agenda. He's plotting a massive surprise dinner at a new Italian restaurant downtown, complete with a hard-to-get reservation and a bouquet of her favorite red roses.
So we are dealing with a narrative structure that has been recycled through decades of sitcoms, romantic comedies, and commercials.
Oh, 100%.
There is zero suspense regarding the outcome.
And when I first read that setup, I initially rolled my eyes at how cliché it was. But then I started thinking about the mechanics of learning. I usually compare this to teaching a kid how to ride a bicycle.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like you would never take a child out to a jagged, unpredictable mountain trail for their first ride.
Right. That would be a disaster.
You take them to a flat, predictable, freshly paved sidewalk, and you bolt training wheels onto the frame. This opening scene isn't just a story, it's a narrative sidewalk.
That's spot on. We can actually look at this through the lens of cognitive psychology, specifically a framework called cognitive load theory.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. Think of your brain's working memory as a computer's RAM. It has a strictly limited capacity for processing new information at any given second. So when you are listening to a foreign language, translating the vocabulary, parsing the unfamiliar syntax, and trying to decipher the pronunciation, that's already taking up about 90% of your available RAM.
Wow. So if you try to open another heavy application on top of that, the system is going to crash.
Exactly. That is the danger of complex storytelling in early education. If the story you're listening to features an intricate murder mystery with 6 suspects...
Or a dense political thriller.
Right. Tracking that plot requires a massive amount of cognitive effort. Your working memory is maxed out trying to solve the mystery, which leaves zero processing power for acquiring the target vocabulary.
That makes total sense.
You might figure out who the killer is, but you won't remember the verb conjugations used to describe the crime.
Right. So by relying on a highly predictable, universally understood cultural trope like the forgetful husband and the surprise romantic dinner, the script effectively bypasses the need for narrative processing.
Yes, the listener's brain recognizes the trope within seconds. It acts as a mental shortcut.
Because they already know exactly where it's going.
Exactly. Because the listener already knows the plot, they don't have to allocate any RAM to predicting it. That surplus brain power is then entirely redirected toward the primary goal.
Which is decoding the target English vocabulary.
Precisely. Words like anniversary, reservation, fancy, and romantic can take center stage because the plot is essentially running on background autopilot.
So the cliché isn't lazy writing at all. It is a deliberate, highly engineered structural choice designed to create a low-friction learning environment.
Yes.
But I do see a potential flaw in this design. Because if you keep a learner on that flat, predictable sidewalk indefinitely, the brain tends to zone out.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if I'm watching a movie where I know exactly what happens next, I start scrolling on my phone.
Right, because the brain is a remarkably efficient energy-saving organ. If it calculates that a situation is entirely predictable, it stops paying close attention.
It just tunes out.
It shifts from active processing to passive monitoring, which is detrimental to language acquisition. You cannot learn effectively when your brain has decided the incoming information is just harmless white noise.
Which brings us to the most incredible, jarring part of this transcript.
Yeah.
Right when the listener is settling into the comforting rhythm of this predictable little romance, the script introduces some massive, reality-bending potholes.
Yeah, the narrative just fractures.
Calling them fractures feels like an understatement. They are spectacular derailments.
They really are.
Let's look at scene 2 again. Emily, who we definitively established as the wife in scene 1, is suddenly at work with Paul. She walks up and says, "Hey, Paul. Nice tie." And Paul responds, "Thanks, Dave."
The architecture of the scene completely collapses.
Emily is suddenly Dave, and the script just keeps accelerating into the skid. Dave starts talking about how it's his anniversary today.
Wait, Dave's anniversary?
Yes, 10 years. And Dave mentions he is celebrating with his wife, whose name is apparently Sarah.
So the protagonist's wife has essentially been overwritten by a completely new character in real time.
But it gets wilder. Scene 3 takes place at a jewelry shop where Paul goes to buy a gift. Emily is back, but now she's playing the shop assistant.
Okay.
Paul states he needs to buy a men's watch with a blue face. Emily asks if it's a gift, and Paul literally says, out loud, "Yes, it's for my wife to give to her husband."
A rather unconventional method of acquiring a timepiece for oneself.
Right. He is openly buying a men's watch for his wife so she can give it back to him. But here's where it gets really interesting. Jump to scene 5.
Yeah.
The climax. The big romantic dinner at the Italian restaurant.
Right.
Paul is sitting across from his wife, who he is now actively calling Sarah. He slides the wrapped gift across the table. And what is it? It's the blue men's watch.
Of course it is.
The wife opens it and joyfully exclaims, "It's the blue one I was looking at." She puts it on and notes that it fits perfectly.
Let me get this straight. A men's watch, which she was somehow already looking at, given to her by her husband who bought it for her to give to him, which ultimately fits her perfectly.
I mean, I have to stop and challenge the source material here, because when I read this, my immediate thought was, this is just incredibly sloppy, low-budget production work.
That is the natural assumption.
Right. Someone in the recording booth stapled 2 different script drafts together. The voice actors just read whatever was on the page to get paid, and they shipped it.
It's very possible.
Are we giving the creators too much credit by assuming this is some kind of masterclass in pedagogy? Could this just be sheer incompetence?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the intent behind the errors is actually irrelevant to the neurological outcome.
Really?
Yes. Whether it was a careless accident in the editing bay or a stroke of deliberate genius by an educator, it serves a highly advanced function. In cognitive psychology, there is a concept known as a schema.
A schema.
A schema is basically a mental blueprint your brain builds to anticipate what belongs in a specific scenario.
Like expecting menus and waiters when you walk into a restaurant.
Precisely. The brain relies on these schemas to process the world quickly. Now, the script establishes a very rigid schema in scene 1. Paul is the husband, Emily is the wife.
Right.
But when Paul suddenly replies, "Thanks, Dave," to his wife's voice, it executes what psychologists call a pattern interrupt.
A pattern interrupt.
Yes, an unexpected absurdity forcibly shatters the schema.
It's a cognitive record scratch.
That's a perfect way to put it. It forces the brain out of that passive autopilot state we discussed earlier.
Wow.
When a listener hears a husband proudly declare he is buying a watch for his wife to give to her husband, it creates a moment of profound cognitive dissonance.
Because it just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. The listener is forced to stop passively absorbing the pleasant, predictable sounds of the language and shift immediately into active translation mode.
I can easily imagine a listener, walking their dog, listening to this, and suddenly stopping in their tracks thinking, wait, did I just translate the word husband wrong?
Exactly.
Like, did I mix up the vocabulary for wife and husband?
They have to mentally rewind the tape and interrogate their own comprehension. It serves as a rigorous, real-time stress test.
I see.
It measures whether the listener is actually parsing the individual English words or if they are just coasting on the comforting vibe of a romantic dinner trope.
That's wild. If they don't notice that Paul just gave his wife a men's watch that fits perfectly, they aren't actually listening to the English language.
No, they're just letting the narrative wash over them.
It's a brilliant, built-in comprehension check. It jolts the learner awake.
Yeah.
And once you survive the mind-bending watch purchase and the mysterious arrival of days, the story hurtles toward its climax.
Yes, the big finale.
This final act serves as a masterclass in a completely different aspect of language learning. Highly specific cultural vocabulary.
This is the pivot point where we transition from viewing language as a sterile system of grammar to understanding language as a dynamic social operating system.
Let's look at the mechanics of Scene 4 and 5 in the source.
Mm-hmm.
Scene 4 is pure frantic pacing. Paul is blowing up balloons. Sarah, or Emily, or Dave, depending on what reality we are in,
Right.
arrives early. Paul panics, instructing her to put on her red dress instead of cooking the lasagna they had planned. He then takes her on a mysterious 30-minute drive.
The tension builds.
Scene 5 reveals the destination. A crowded, ambient spot called Mario's. They order grilled steak, they order seafood, they request a bottle of wine to celebrate, and they raise their glasses in a toast to forever.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you begin to realize that language and culture are hopelessly entangled.
Yeah.
You cannot learn to speak a new language without simultaneously absorbing the cultural norms, values, and rituals of the people who speak it.
It's not just a list of nouns and verbs. It's a manual for how to operate within a specific society.
Exactly. When the script introduces vocabulary like bistro, lasagna, grilled steak, and the overarching framework of a highly orchestrated surprise anniversary dinner,
It's actively teaching Western romantic traditions alongside the English phrasing.
yes, it establishes a societal blueprint. The script is telling the listener, in this particular culture, a 10-year marital anniversary is a major social milestone.
Right.
It dictates that celebration involves dining out at a specialized ambient location, donning specific garments like a red dress or a nice tie, and consuming elevated foods like steak rather than everyday meals.
It is equipping the listener for real-world social interaction. They aren't just learning the word for food, they're learning the hierarchy of what food signifies celebration.
Precisely.
And I notice this cultural embedding in the transitional phrases, too.
Oh, how so?
The dialogue isn't limited to functional statements like, I am happy, or
Yeah.
where is the restaurant? Paul and Emily use phrases like, put this on, take your time, and drive carefully.
Ah, yes. Those phrases are highly practical, but they are also deeply context-dependent cultural idioms.
Right.
Think about the phrase, take your time. You don't literally grasp time with your hands and put it in your pocket.
That would be a neat trick, though.
It would. But no, it is a social grace. It's an idiom designed to convey patience, politeness, and deference to another person's comfort.
So by embedding that specific phrase within the tension of a rushing wife and a panicking husband, the listener learns the appropriate emotional context for the vocabulary.
Exactly. You don't just learn how to pronounce the words. You learn the social cues of when to deploy them to de-escalate stress.
That's so smart. But just when the listener has absorbed all this rich cultural data, after the steak is eaten, the wine is poured, and they toast to forever, the curtain abruptly falls. The illusion of the story completely shatters.
The fourth wall is broken, and the narrative framework is discarded entirely.
It really is a hard pivot. The source material outlines an ending segment where the characters of Paul and Sarah drop their personas. They return as Emily and Paul, the instructors. They break the fourth wall, look directly at the listener and start issuing pedagogical directives.
They get right down to business.
They command the listener to replay the audio, repeat the dialogue aloud, and practice role-playing one character while a partner plays the other.
Mm.
And then Emily delivers this highly specific final instruction. She says, don't be afraid of mistakes.
A very telling instruction.
So what does this all mean? Why drag the listener through this convoluted, reality-bending domestic drama just to end with a plea to play make-believe?
Well, to understand that ending, we have to look at one of the most formidable barriers in adult education.
Okay.
In applied linguistics, there is a heavily researched concept known as the affective filter.
The affective filter. Break down how that operates in an adult brain.
It is essentially a psychological defense mechanism. It comprises the anxiety, self-doubt, ego, and fear of public embarrassment that prevents people, especially fully grown adults, from producing a new language.
Oh, I see.
When you speak your native language, you are articulate, competent, and you project authority. You have an identity tied to your eloquence.
Right. But when you try to speak a new language, you suddenly sound like a toddler.
Yeah.
You lose all that hard-earned adult competence.
Exactly. When you try to converse in a new language as yourself, every mispronounced vowel or botched verb conjugation feels like a direct assault on your intelligence.
It feels like a personal failure.
Yes. And when that happens, your affective filter spikes. Your amygdala perceives a social threat, your brain floods with stress hormones, and you literally cannot recall the vocabulary you just memorized.
Oh, wow.
The anxiety blocks the cognitive retrieval process.
I have experienced that exact paralysis. Like, you can study flashcards for hours in your room, but the second you try to order a coffee in Paris, your brain just flatlines because you are terrified the barista is going to judge you.
Right.
You feel profoundly stupid.
That is the affective filter paralyzing your processing capability. Children acquire language so rapidly, largely because they haven't developed that rigid ego yet. They don't care if they look silly.
But adults care immensely.
They do. But role-playing acts as a psychological shield against that ego threat. By explicitly instructing the listener to practice, by pretending to be Dave or Sarah or Paul, the script effectively lowers the affective filter.
Because you put on a mask.
The mask provides crucial psychological distance. When you stumble over the pronunciation of reservation or completely mangle the syntax of anniversary, you are no longer failing as yourself.
Right. You're just playing a part.
Exactly. Dave is the one who made the grammatical error. Sarah is the one who mispronounced the word. You, the intelligent adult, remain safely insulated from the embarrassment.
It turns language acquisition from a high-stakes referendum on your intelligence into a low-stakes theatrical game.
Yes, it completely changes the dynamic.
That completely reframes Emily's final instruction. When she says, don't be afraid of mistakes, it isn't just a generic motivational poster quote.
No, not at all.
It is a calculated pedagogical instruction validating the role play as a sanctioned safe space to fail.
It is the ultimate permission structure to bypass your own ego.
This forces a total reevaluation of the source material. What initially presents as a cheesy, confusing, poorly edited audio play about a husband and wife is actually a highly structured, meticulously engineered tool.
It really is quite brilliant when you look at it that way.
It utilizes predictable tropes to aggressively lower your cognitive load, freeing up your mental RAM. It deploys utterly bizarre narrative absurdities to shatter your schemas and test your active comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, it leverages the psychological safety of role play to bypass your affective filter and eliminate your fear of speaking. It reminds you that the media we consume to learn, whether it's a language app, a corporate training video, or a historical documentary, always has a hidden architecture designed to manipulate exactly how your brain processes information.
It reveals the invisible scaffolding of education.
Yes.
And this raises an important question, or perhaps a lingering provocation, for you to consider as you navigate your own attempts to learn something new.
Okay, I'm listening.
If we look closely at the reality of this script, a lesson where the official published curriculum features a husband buying a men's watch for his wife to give back to him, and then she happily wears it because it fits perfectly.
The ultimate plot hole.
Right. Well, maybe the ultimate takeaway isn't about the pursuit of flawless grammar or perfect narrative continuity.
The script itself proves that perfection isn't a prerequisite for communication.
Exactly. Perhaps the real secret to mastering any new skill, especially something as deeply human as a language, is learning to embrace the absolute absurdity of the process.
That's a great way to look at it.
When you finally manage to strip away the paralyzing fear of being perfectly correct, When you stop worrying about looking foolish in front of the barista or your peers, you are left with something much more valuable.
What's that?
You are left with the sheer, messy, beautiful joy of simply trying to be understood by another human being.
The messy joy of communication. Because ultimately, you can't learn how a language breathes by safely studying a textbook in isolation. You have to step out onto the narrative sidewalk, put on metaphorical training wheels, and accept that falling off is just part of the ride.